everyone. This is Melina and
Jordan!
And we are the board certified BAes.
BAes.
Back with Javon May.
Oh, how you guys?
Again, we're just having so much fun. We just need to break it up into two. So this is part 2. If you haven't watched part 1, make sure you go back and watch it. But we're going to hop right in and get back into it. Okay? So you're based in LA, which is culturally diverse, just very diverse all around. And was that always the vision for your agency, or did the community kind of shape that direction for you?
Yeah. I think the community definitely shaped it. I mean, I come from, I went to high school in Long Beach. Go Jeff Rabbits, Long Beach probably. And it was, Long Beach, if no one had been there, it's extremely diverse. Mm-hmm. From the Black community to Samoan to Latino, not only that, but different just groups of people, genders, races, sexual orientations. Even my high school had different clubs and variations of, 4 organizations and community groups to get together. So I think I just grew up around just being in that melting pot. And I wouldn't say it made me at that moment say, hey, this is what I want to do and this is who I want to work with. It was more of, I'm comfortable in that space. I'm comfortable in that setting. I'm comfortable with working with families of diverse backgrounds and groups and hearing their perspective. And although I haven't lived their experiences or, I'm not in their shoes, but at least I can relate based on, again, some of that experience being involved around people of different backgrounds and ethnic groups. So I would say it definitely has been a point in mind to say, hey, I want to start an agency within the area that I grew up. And I think that was important for me. I think too, as a Black man, how I saw it was this is the community that raised me. This is a community that instilled in values into me where I had to be flexible. I had to be open. I had to, be around different groups of people and be comfortable in that and check my own biases along the way, right? So it definitely allowed me to come into the space and come into it with confidence. Not saying I know it all, right? But at least I know how to be sensitive and listen to different groups and point them into the right direction. If I can't do it, then hey, I know someone else that can. So I would definitely say it for sure shaped where I wanted to start my organization. I don't think I could have started anywhere else. Due to that, I think just the community in general shapes initially, as we know, being behavioralist, the environment shapes your behavior. And I would say the environment and where I grew up definitely shaped mine. I mean, even my family is so diverse, from white to Black. My uncle's from England and, from Hispanic to, and I think it created a safe space within me to say, hey, again, I may not fully understand, but at least I can empathize in the sense that I have been around those who come from diverse backgrounds and different groups and kind of be able to shed light on that perspective to help excel and grow my organization.
Amazing.
That is big. I think that kind of leads to the next question too is, so you could say that there's a difference between cultural competence and cultural humility. And so can you define what that is for you and the agency and how it matters to what you're doing in the ABA world specifically?
Yeah. I think cultural and a lot of people confuse the two, great question. Cultural competence comes with lived experience. And that's something that, again, the word is thrown around, but unless you have lived the experience of a Black man or a Black woman or a Latino or Latinx or, someone who is of the gay or lesbian background, you can't necessarily say I'm competent in that area, right? And I think competence is one thing and you can measure it, right? Where it's, again, saying that, hey, I've not only professionally, right, developed the skills to work with this group, but also in my personal life, I understand the different components and the intricacies and the behaviors and the terminology and the ability to just adapt around, right? For me personally, Black culture, right? And I think that's different than humility, and humility is great to have. I think you can't have one without the other, right?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times people think, oh, it's just one, cultural competence or cultural. You can't have one. You can have cultural competence. You can't, have cultural competence and not have cultural humility.
Yeah.
You can have cultural humility but not be competent.
Right.
And I think there's a difference in cultural humility. We're understanding the different backgrounds. We've read different studies. We've worked with different groups. We're able to sympathize or empathize with them. But I think humility comes from a standpoint of going back to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, where I want to be humble enough to not only check my own biases, but include different background groups in the decisions that I make. Cultural competence, again, is something that even I say, hey, no, I need to get someone who is competent in this area in order to support the needs of my clients or the family. So, for example, whether that's gender affirming care, right? Whether that is, a lot of times we see it, hey, I have a family who English is not their first language, right? They're developing some of those skills. So I probably should either get translation services or someone who can help articulate that. I think one field that, of course, they can improve too is going back to the medical model. And I say this all the time, is if you go into a emergency, 24-hour emergency or whatever, crisis, they always have someone there to handle that specific component. So if it's cardiology, if it's neurology, if it's, giving birth to a new mom, they don't sit there and have one person do it all.
Yeah.
They're saying, hey, no, I'm competent in this area. I noticed this. Let me collaborate and bring in someone who this is their specialty. Right. So I think it's important to, in our field, understand that, just because I think going back to quality outcomes, you're able to really measure it too, not only based on the work that we're doing, but if there's any groups of people or other practitioners that we need to collaborate to ensure the success of our treatment plans, goals, assessment, whatever it may be. So I think it's just a lifestyle you got to continuously live.
Yeah.
And it doesn't just end with, hey, I took a training on DEI and I'm good.
That part.
Yeah. No magic pills.
So, I mean, this kind of leads into the next question, like what you were just saying. How do you hire and train a team to serve a population as diverse as Los Angeles?
Yeah.
What does that typically look like?
I mean, recruitment is one. I think that's important to recruit those who represent the community that you're within, right? And there's nothing wrong with that, right? I see it too in different lenses of, let's say, which we understand, like policing, right? Community policing. You're not going to see me, if I was a police officer, at least from where I'm raised, the Long Beach, Compton area, go into the suburbs and think that I'm confident or comfortable to do my job.
Yeah.
Now, can I? Yeah. But I've never serviced this community well enough where I say, I have the training and I have the experience to be able to do this. Vice versa. Police go in areas where it's a predominantly Black and brown community, right? And I think that's where you see the barriers and issues occur when we try and infiltrate an environment or perspective without not only training people, but also developing and recruiting the staff who should be working with those children, youth, and adults. So I think that's really big in regards to recruiting individuals who speak different languages. Ensuring if I have cases that I need to fill, I'm not just trying to fill it based on a number, but I'm also filling it based on the demographics and the profile of that individual and that family so I can best service them, right? And I think sometimes we're just trying to staff it without taking into consideration all of those things, right? So I would say it's really important to not only recruit and develop, but also train and continuously train your staff on diversity, equity, inclusion, and I like to add belonging too, just because that's important as well, no matter what demographic you're a part of. and it's important. It's so funny when I first started doing, when I first started my company, I was doing interviews, and I know as a black man, and going in front of an interview with someone that doesn't look like you, and how you have to code switch, how you have to manage your behavior, how you present yourself. So funny story, I was doing an interview, and it was a black woman, and when she jumped on the Zoom, nonverbal communication, I just seen her take a big sigh and relax. And me, circle transparency, I'm gonna ask, because I want to know what made you kind of relax? What's the difference between this interview and the others? And they said, when you jump on the camera, I was surprised. I did not expect to see someone that looked like me. And she said that made me so comfortable. So I didn't even get a question out.
Yeah.
But she was able to relax and say, I can be myself.
I mean, I recently even had that experience with a parent.
Yeah.
I'm doing assessments now, and it was a mom that daughter just got diagnosed. She's a teenager. And it was like, turned on the camera, and she was like, literally same thing, just like, okay, cool. Like, yeah. Because even when it came to like, even things like sensory, right? Like talking about sensory things, she's like, yeah, she's independent in everything except for her hair. That's really hard. So we have to, and I'm like, I get it. And she's like, I knew you would. And I'm like, cool. So yeah, those are the things that really can make a difference. Yeah.
So recruitment first, and then ongoing training and development is next. So many agencies, again, just do the DI to cross off the box. We did it the first year, yay. But how are you consistently developing your staff and showing up and showing them? And not only that, again, being particular about the clients that you take, or saying, this is not in my wheelhouse. I would rather outsource and refer you to an agency that I know they have someone that can support your son or daughter a little bit better than I can. And that's where cultural humility comes into play.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I might not be able to be the one to do this.
Yeah, and I mean, that is part of our ethics codes, right? Like, if you're not competent in like a ABA skill, then we shouldn't be providing services in that. I mean, what you're suggesting is treat it the same with DEI and cultural, like on a cultural level. Like, if you are not familiar with the cultural and never worked with that culture before, either find some support or find another place. And that's not to like ignore or neglect that family, but it is in the best interest of that family to not have to assume that they're going to learn to completely change themselves or live in a code switched way. So I think that's a big point.
So the medical field in general, but especially also like ABA, there's a lot of trust issues. So with that being said, especially with maybe some of our communities, how do you address this head on with families that kind of have trust issues with even wanting to start ABA?
And that, I've learned that that's ingrained, just as we know from our personal experience within our culture. And I think, one, being able to acknowledge it, and a lot of times our counterparts can't necessarily say or relate. So what we do, and even within Autonomous Behavior Solution, if we encounter that or know that's a cultural values, one, we address it and say it. We first acknowledge that, hey, I know within our community that this is uncomfortable, right? We were taught to see mental health, behavioral health as something that we kind of turn a blind eye to, right? In perspective, right? But however, I've been a part of, let's say, clients or lives who are at progress where, we see change, right? And I think it takes patience, it takes grace, it takes sometimes the ability to take a step back, right? And kind of see big picture that they've probably been to another agency that didn't consider that. They've probably been to another agency that, hey, they didn't even ask them in the initial assessment, what are some cultural values that I should be sensitive for you, your child, and your family before we even provide this therapy? And that's something within our assessments, there's literally like 5 questions that we're asking to ensure that we're sensitive to that. Not only as from the BCBA, but when we staff the case. So I know, and we know it's still a work in progress within our community.
Yeah.
I think what helps too is when they walk in to the clinic and they see, going back to recruitment, a diverse background of clinicians, right? Who looks like that little boy, who looks like that little girl. And I think it's a kind of unsaid, going back to relief. I can put my shoulders back, you know.
Yeah.
I know they're not going to develop a goal to have my child fix her hair appropriately. It's like, wait, but
that part. I mean, yeah. I mean, even
it's that, you know.
Yeah, just I mean, even we have 2 daughters, and our older daughter has beautiful, luscious curly hair, and even that, like now being a mom, just like seeing people and the way that they react to her sometimes, where it's supposed to be a compliment, but it's like feeling that they have the right to like, you know, go and touch her hair or go and fix. Like that is one thing that makes my skin crawl so much more than I thought it would. Like we've always had this like, please don't touch my hair, you know what I mean? But now that I'm a mom, even more so even like you're saying, like working on these skills, like, right, like thinking about, even we had one of the younger girls in our clinic, and they were working on, you know, independence for hair, right? And so even being like, can I I'm not on this case, but can I help? Because you know, nobody else is like, they're like brushing her hair dry, and I'm like stressed out. I'm like, no, or like the rubber bands they're using, just like things like that, feeling seen, feeling, you know, like, oh, I like my child is understood in this regard. So I think exactly what you're saying, like that's all just like a big deal. And being on the mommy side of it now, understanding it even more so, like how sweet it is when you feel like your child is understood beyond just like, oh yeah, I care for this child, I love this child, whatever, but it's like feeling understood, and that they understand what maybe she's thinking right now when it comes to like her hair, or, you know, those things. Like all those things mean such a big deal now that I'm on the parent perspective, and you just, So
and
exactly what you're saying.
We, so we have a school contract, and when I first, a director of mine pitched it after COVID, and it was like, we need you to develop a contract and grant for this. The first thing that came to mind was the location, right? And it's in the Lamert Crenshaw area, which you know, and predominantly, which normally I'm not even Long Beach used to, is the school. It's probably predominantly Black, right? So within that, I think going back to what we're talking about, I also had to take a step back as leader and say, okay, we're servicing this community. There's certain skill sets, both soft and hard skills, that you need to have to not only clinically but personally to be able to infiltrate this group and be able to relate and build that rapport and buy-in. And what's beautiful in developing that, and this is going on 4 years, is that I've seen, me working for a school district, the difference in not only being able to provide that cultural competency and humility, but also being strategic about who you put and where. Same thing with those clients. And so on the mass level, from teachers and educators, it's just so beautiful to see like their appreciativeness of us also being sensitive to the demographics and the groups and the children that we're working with, right? Because again, it's not saying you're not well equipped enough or skilled enough or don't have the education or knowledge. Sometimes it's, hey, this probably requires a certain skill set, not only clinically, but also life experience that we need to be sensitive about in order to appropriately, kind of support and lead and guide this entire school district so that they're also successful. So,
and this is true in education. This is true in the medical field, like being also a birthing doula. There's times where I'm in the room with a male OBGYN, and the way that he's talking to a mom that's going through labor, it's like you'll never understand what it feels like, and you're telling her to do this, do that, whatever. It's just like it's that part, the empathy, the understanding from the experience, So,
Yeah, that's hard. And I wanted to circle back to one of the things that you had mentioned there, which was in your assessment process, you have like 5 questions, right?
Yeah.
That's not normal. you know, but it should be. But I didn't want to skip past that without highlighting that, because it's something that even like the agency that I'm at, I typically do most of the assessments. But in the recent like years, have been like, actually, I'm not asking enough of this. Like I do once we get started, but like in the initial assessment period, you know, I'm all about the kiddo and things and getting the information. But I found that it was after the assessment is when I actually dived into asking those questions. And so recently I've been like, no, I'm going to put these at the front. So that way we know that. But I wanted to highlight and circle back to it because that's not the normal every day. It's do the Vineland assessment and we're good and like, let's move on. No question on the Vineland has ever said anything about your culture. You know, culture is not a standardized test.
There's one question, culturally appropriate eye contact.
Oh.
Yeah, that is true. There is the one. That is that one. You are right. There is that one. It's the only time they reference culture in the 300 and something questions that we read, right? And so just the point of having that in there beyond what it is that we're required, because DEI is not part of an insurance mandate. It's not something that is required, but we know that it is an important piece to have an effective relationship. Yeah. So I just wanted to highlight that we should all, as BCBAs and clinicians, clinic owners, be thinking about this and moving that forward. And that comes from the mentors that are, about to dinosaur out of the field to the, young ones coming in wanting to know and be aware of that. Yeah. Just wanted to circle back because I thought that was very important. I know that was 10 minutes ago, but it's still really, really important and I never forgot it.
Yeah. No, it's powerful. I honestly don't hear a lot of agency do it. It's not required by insurance payers. I think too, a lot of times, even when I started, it's things that we know we should address and be sensitive to, but no one wants to ask those questions. No one feels comfortable sometimes stripping down the things that we're so used to because we're just trying to get through that assessment to ask, hey, we need to take our shoes off when you enter into your home, right? Is there anything about the way you communicate that's we should be aware of and respectful of?
Is it disrespectful for children to make eye contact?
For children to make eye contact, right? Is there any language, right, that you will feel most comfortable with when we not only start this initial assessment, but also ongoing services to ensure, your involvement and participation of your child's plan increases as well. So I think, and maybe I'll do research on it someday.
Double PhD?
Comparing, indirect assessments and just to see if those questions are asked, if we really kind of, instead of just checking off the box and like you said, asking that one eye contact question, are we really having a whole section within our assessment process where we're diving into the cultural and the differences of your home and how we should address them? Of course, there's certain things that we still should respect just as individuals, and that's for you do have a cultural competency policy for your family, so they also understand hey, we treat ourselves this way, we respect them this way. So that's important too, right? Absolutely. But I think at the same time, it's really asking them if there's anything, even within your previous ABA agency culturally, that was not done right. Yeah. And that we can make a change and do differently. And sometimes I see it as helping out the field in a sense, in acknowledging things that we have done wrong. And it just takes, again, that one BCBA organization to say, hey, I know this happens. I know they weren't sensitive to the color of your skin or maybe the daily living skills that we put in place, right? Or I've seen it where you should eat at the table. I remember when I was a BT, I had a supervisor to say, no, we're having to go and they must eat at the table. But I grew up, we didn't have a table to eat at. We ate on the couch. We had maybe a few dinner trays and that's it. You think you're going to come to my house and say you must get a table and you must eat at the table? No. So I had to take a step back and even challenge my BCBA and say, but that's not what this family does. Yeah. That's not a part of their day-to-day lives. That's not, I know that's what you want. It's nice to eat at the table around together, but that's not every family and every culture.
Or my kind of similar to you, my family's very mixed up as well. And my uncle is married. My aunt is Ethiopian,
Mm-hmm.
and they have injera, which is like the bread,
Mm-hmm.
and they do a lot of like eating with your hands, you know, and like that is, and like that is normal. So it's like even like, okay, well, is it normal for, you know, certain cultures to eat with their hands rather than silverware, like things
Chopsticks,
like that,
yeah. Just all those things.
And then asking yourself, me doing this, does that necessarily decrease their quality of life? No.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So why?
Yeah.
It's my own bias and what I was taught in the ways that hey, this is why I'm implementing this. But is this appropriate for them? And is it socially significant for their lives? Not what I think it should be.
That's exactly what that BCBA was missing at that time. Is it applied? Does this apply here? Is it socially significant? Right? We've got this foundation. We just don't reference it enough. We really do have to look at it. And yeah, you're right. Like teaching kids to say hi or I want milk. Well, they call it leche. Like that's what we should say for the family. Like that, why is our goal say milk? Like, you know, like why are we requiring, you know, these things to be our way? And, you know, I've heard other BCBAs talk about like, well, when they get to school, it's going to be this way. Well, it doesn't have to be. You don't know that. That's the future. Like, we can deal with that, but that's not the culture that they have right now, and we have to be culturally responsive to what they're going through now. That's what makes it socially significant.
Yeah.
The future hasn't happened yet. We're not there. You know, we can't predict that they're going to have this experience. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
So that's I think it's such a good point, and you know, I'd love for us as society, just as human beings, to start recognizing that everything is different. Everyone's perspective, everybody's upbringing, everyone's interests, they can be different. That's okay. We can be different. We don't all have to fit the same mold. We don't all have to be cut from the same cloth. It's okay. And you know, it would be lovely to get to that. There's a lot of work that needs to be done to get there. So much.
What values? Question and ask yourself, what values have our society and behaviors have our society has already been built upon, right? So I see it as we teach these skills, but also in the back of your head, knowing that inadvertently people of color, we're going to have to code switch. We're going to have to mask. No matter what future you're talking about, what has our society been built upon, we're always going to have to be taught to turn it on and turn it off.
Yeah.
Right? So the least I can do respectfully to those who I've worked with who of different backgrounds and groups is at the time that we're teaching the learner is to be sensitive to their upbringing and their needs and individualizing our treatment plans and goals based on where they see themselves and giving them the autonomy to make the choices. Society's already there and going to paint the picture for us. It's more of, hey, we want to make sure we teach them to have the free will and the motivation to also want to speak up and do things for themselves.
Absolutely. So then that kind of leads a little bit into like the next question that I do want to ask is, if we're talking about, you know, family culture, and there's a difference between, I mean, LA's got, you know, little Tokyo, you get all the littles everywhere, right? You know what I mean? That has its own culture within the big culture of the melting pot, and then then you can even shrink that down to just family, because, you know, my family, your family, the culture of that household is different from the next culture of the household, right? So then how do you address and make sure that your team is aware and respect that when families are inviting us, or we're heading into like the most sacred place typically of a family, which is their like private space of their home, how do you make sure that your staff are respecting boundaries or aware of them, or know what they're imposing on, or just flat out awareness basically?
So we do what we call pre-treatment planning with all of our staff. So a lot of times it's like, here you go, you get assigned, we'll review the treatment plan, and that may be it. Or we may not, right? We may just see the goals on our EMR system, and this is what we need to track. I think it's important, and we do it, is to intentionally meet with them and kind of discuss some of the nuances of that family, the expectations of that family. Not only to also make sure, hey, this is a right fit for the family, but also, hey, is this the right fit for you too, right? Because I don't want to put you in an environment or a place that, one, you don't feel comfortable or confident to implement the procedures that we set forth, because that's when you have an issue with fidelity and being able to follow that bit appropriately, and the client again seeing progress. So I think it's important, going back, to be extremely transparent with not only the families but also your staff and what's needed within this home. What they like, what they don't like, what also didn't work with the other BT, and why. Right? So we don't make those same mistakes. And I think it's a big part of it, overarching, is accountability. I think we all must take accountability to say, hey, and we've been a part of it. Been something that someone or a friend you had growing up came into your home and did something, and mama was like, did you just not take off the shoes, or did they just open the fridge and not, or
did they
just say what I think they just said, or even eye contact, right? Like, hey, they're staring at me in my eye while we're having a conversation, and that may be seen as disrespectful in other cultures, right? Or, hey, they offered you food, and I know the board originally like, don't take anything, but in this culture, that is extremely disrespectful to not take anything if that family offers it to you. Right? So I think ensuring that, one, we're transparent with our staff before they even start. And then also, if there's anything, and I think it goes back to, we're always endless learners. So I think, too, if there's anything that disrupts that within the family, and we call them clinical care circles, we come back and we say, okay, what happened? What was the antecedent? What was the behavior, right? What was the consequence? And how can we change and shift this? Do we need to even rebuild rapport with that client or that family because something happened that rubbed mom or dad the wrong way, right? And also, again, being able to have that humility to say, hey, I'm sorry.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
A lot of times that goes a lot with families. I'm sorry.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But what you're also speaking to is none of that stuff's billable.
No.
Right? You're talking about, when we have, but I do find what you're doing very valuable, even though I didn't know that you did that until just now, right? Is we have pre-screenings for anything medical that we go to, right? We have a check with a doctor, blah, 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 right? Before we even get into a surgery, all that stuff happens. That's not common in our field. But the fact that you're doing that and you're sitting down the staff, like, these are the staff that I've identified that are going to work Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Tuesday, Thursday. This is going to be great. This is how we're going to make this work. This is what we need. This is what we need you to bring. This is the rules of the family that you need to know before entering. I think that is something tremendous, to be honest. I do think that is something that we don't do at all. And I'm just like, wow, I wish I could do that, but I know I can't. So,
and I think it's, as an organization, and I've seen it as a leader, is something we've had to sacrifice. So even in addition to that, all our staff get in clinic 15 minutes before the session and after, right? Not only to make sure you can set up the session appropriately and be able to take a moment and pause and think about how you're going to implement these strategies, but I think, too, that's a moment in time, and I've seen it, where that team, BCBA, myself, is able to also come and shed light on maybe something that happened at home yesterday or last night, or things we need to be sensitive to, right? So I think, too, if we talk about quality all the time and improving the, cultural awareness and sensitivity of our staff, sometimes we're going to have to experience some losses a little bit, right? And that may be, hey, insurance is going to pay for this. However, long term, how much is it going to save me? Because, one, I'm not losing staff. Two, I'm not unintentionally placing families, placing people in homes that they're not comfortable with, or and I think you have to think about the bigger picture, and again, the quality of life of that entire individual, in order to make those strategic decisions, because, again, you see more progress in the long run. I love that. I do really, really love that. So let me skip, and maybe this will be our last question. What for BCBAs, because there's a growing number of BCBAs, but not all work in diverse areas. But for those that might be entering into diverse communities,
and getting prepared to take on a client that doesn't look like them, right? But they haven't necessarily done the internal work to get themselves prepared for that, and they're just assuming everything's going to be the same. What is something that they could do to start? What do you think?
First thing I was saying, I said even myself, sometimes I have to do it. The parent they know their child best. They're the master of it all. I'm not. I may have had a BCBA and worked with X amount of families, but the parent knows them, and the client, they know themselves best. So first advice is really to listen, right? Ask questions, come into a space wanting to learn about that individual, their families, their values, their belief systems, not judge, but learn to be able to adapt some things that maybe I was taught initially that I may need to change, be willing to change too, right? Because I think a lot of times we can be so rigid in our field with what we're so used to do, from assessments to parent interviews to how we even come across the individuals, without sitting back to ask, well, again, what works for you, right? Can I just sit back and just watch you in your home and how you guys do things, right? We're going to help, we're going to get everything started, but at first I want to watch you do it. And I think just hearing that as a mom, they love it. Like, we have a client who we've working with for quite some time who has cerebral palsy. And with that not only comes, verbal, but also gross and fine motor skills that are limited. And when we first started, literally the whole month was, parent, I just want to watch how you work with your child. That's it. Not watch how you work with your child so I can say you're doing that wrong or that wrong, but no, watch how you work with your child so I also can adapt those same skills and strategies to how we implement our treatment plans. And when I tell you, it was a game changer, to the point where it's like, again, it equips not only the staff to feel more confident to implement the procedures because they know the family agrees with it, but also that family is seeing, hey, they're doing what I do. Yeah, we're adding a scientific component to it. But how I communicate, the paraverbal language and how it's being done, I'm adapting it to the individual that I'm working with.
I love that. And just like the piece of, like, sometimes I think as parents, like they tend to feel that they're doing it all wrong. That's why they are receiving the services. For you to model something that, like, use them to model, I feel like it's probably also encouraging to be like, okay, I'm doing something right as well. Cool. So that's huge. Thank you for answering.
No, I think that was a great answer too, because I've definitely seen it before too, where parents are like, don't help them. They can do that. Don't do it. Like, they're in the background doing that because people are just jumping in and doing it, like, over prompting and being support when making a hindrance more than being the support and help that they needed. And so I think it's really important that you say that, because what you're talking about too is a lot of the stuff you're talking about isn't billable.
No.
Right, watching a parent for a month, I don't know how many parent consultation hours you had to be able to do, you know what I mean? Like, so eventually some of those things might run out and it just doesn't look right. But the quality of care long term is far exceeded because of those early done efforts. And that's the importance of it, right? Like,
and we get that information based on assessment, based on pre-screening. If you do a great assessment, I know, what is it, Hanley does it, where they really take into consideration the background of the individual, the parent interview, before they start to implement different reinforcers, different escape extinction procedures, because that will be able to guide you to say, hey, is this a family that I just need to take a step back a little bit and build more rapport, or they've had ABA before. Parents have been taught what the functions, they know what a token board. All we need to do is now kind of adapt to what we're doing, right? So I think two, one, a lot of it's not non-billable, but two, I think during the assessment and screening and intake process, really identifying which client needs what, right? And I think that will help also reduce costs. So we're not doing it for everyone, but we're doing it for those families who we know, again, first time having ABA, right? First mom who they just received this diagnosis, and we know it's so uncomfortable. You're regretting what you've done, you're asking yourself questions, you're thinking through everything, and I think it's important. Generalization is powerful, and if you can't make the parent feel confident to be able to do it, it means nothing.
Yeah.
Once you leave, we're gonna see some resurgence, right?
It's true. It's very true. And I think that there is no better note than to end on that, because I think that if nobody takes anything away from this, we should be taking that away. Like, we should be taking that we need to put in the time, energy, and effort in the beginning to have long-term results, right? We need to be putting in the time into our staff, right? We need to use the non-billable time, even though we don't get paid, don't reimburse it. But if we truly want to make that meaningful change, then the balance far outweighs the cost of it. You know what I mean? Like, the benefits, far outweigh the cost of doing that. Just a 30-minute meeting can work wonders.
Yeah, it can.
And I mean, if we're in California, we're talking about $25, right? You know, to pay somebody for an hour to have a meeting.
Yeah.
You know, and people look at that and they're like, no, that's cut into the margins. But the client's going to be with you for like 4 years now. You know what I mean? Like, you'll get it back.
Yeah.
So taking that time. So I do think that's if nobody takes anything else, take away that we should be putting in the effort, the time, and the energy. Yeah. And the benefits will come for the agency.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much for your time, Javon.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you guys for tuning in. And again, make sure you follow him at Javon.May.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And if you're ever in LA, hit him up.
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Appreciate your time.
Bye.
See you on the next one.